Am I live? I think I'm live. I don't know. Hold on, this is an experiment. Yeah. Let me look. I'm gonna start over. Oh wait, am I live? Okay. Let me. Okay. This is an experiment. So hold on a second. Let me fix this thing. I don't know if you can see me better or not. I'll get it better next time. But okay, we're going to continue on. I'm this experiment. I'm trying this. I got my instead of using my laptop, which I got right here next to me, I'm using my cell phone, which hopefully it's going to fix the frames per second issue that I've had. So I can see myself on the computer. I got a laptop right next to me, and I can see that I'm live. So that way, I can't respond to comments this way, but I can at least respond to them after I'm all done. But I can see if there's a problem, is somebody going to say something? Okay. It kind of comes up on my cell phone, but not here. So this is all new to me. So I'm just learning, so bear with me. Okay, we're continuing on with James chapter 5. Okay, and if you want to read with me, it's, by the way, I hope you had a good weekend. You know, Halloween is not what it used to be. And I know when I was a kid, I went trick-or-treating and everything. And I remember I dressed it up. I was living in Puerto Rico at the time. And 2 times when I went trick-or-treating, once was in Puerto Rico, and it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I dressed up like Castro. And another time I did it when we were in Europe, and the people thought we were beggars and asking for money when we went door to door. But it's different. It's not the same anymore. You know, there's so many people have it, Halloween associated with a lot of witchcraft and demonic activity, and it is. And a lot of kids don't see it that way. They're just thinking about candy. But adults ought to know better. The problem I have today with it culturally is that this woke group, this crowd, these kids that are growing up in the internet have a real identity crisis. And you start dressing up men like women. And, you know, you saw in the news recently, this one teachers from an elementary school took all their kids on a field trip to a gay lesbian bar to, you know, where they have drag queens and they have all kind of exotic type things on the menu. I mean, that's out of line. That's really inappropriate. And you're going that far and people aren't saying anything and they're just going along with all these holidays as if, you know, business is normal, and it's not. We live in a changing time, and Christians need to speak up. I wish I could do more, you know, but I pray every day, God, show me what I can do. Give me an opportunity to speak up for righteousness' sake. And not that we're judging and we're trying to be critical of other people, but my goodness, pay attention and start being mature. Okay, here's a warning to the rich. So what are you going to walk away with this? Is that, you know, God is a real concern about justice and fair. This morning I went to pay my rent, and besides just a rent charge was 10 other charges that were thrown on there to just add it up. So I went to the manager, explained all this to me, and she really wasn't able to. And you know, it's you got corporations and businesses, and you got people that have a lot of money that take advantage of other people. I know that I've seen it in the past is where people will hire a lot of illegals coming over across the border right now. They got to work, so people are hiring them and then with the sole intention of calling immigration services and not paying them. You know, and God isn't looking at borders to determine what's fair and right. What's fair is fair and what's right is right. And so he's got a real warning here, especially this has gone all through time. People are greedy. People try to get something for nothing. People don't want to pay their bills, you know, and we got a real problem. So not just today, but this happened in James' time as well. You know, you remember Aristotle Onassis. He's the richest man in the world. And yet all the money that he had couldn't extend his life, and it couldn't help his health. You know, Jacqueline Kennedy ended up marrying him. And so money can't buy happiness. And a lot of people, though, they want the chance to prove that for themselves. And that's why people go out and buy lottery tickets. They think, Lord, if I get rich, I'm going to be different than all these people that lost it all. And no, you won't. The problem about having money, a lot of money, is called stewardship. You got to learn to grow with it. You know, if your parents haven't taught you, all of a sudden it falls into you, chances are you're going to squander it. Okay? By the way, Jesus talked a lot about money. 16 of the 38 parables were concerned on how to handle money and possessions. In the Gospels alone, an amazing 1 out of every 10 verses, 288 in all, deal directly with the subject of money. The Bible offers 500 verses on prayer, less than 500 verses on faith, but more than 2,000 verses on money and possessions. Billy Graham said before he died, he says, you want to know a true spiritual condition of somebody, look at how they spend their money. And you can pretty well see where their heart is and where their priorities. Why? Because where your treasure is, where your heart will be. Now, when it comes to money and the things of God, there are 4 types of people. If you want to take notes, it's a good time to do it, okay? First of all, those who are poor outwardly and poor inwardly. They don't have any money in their pocket, and they're spiritually bankrupt too. Okay, they got little of this world's goods, and at the same time, they don't know anything of Jesus Christ or his love. Of all people, these are probably the most to be pitied. Okay? And second category are those who are poor outwardly, but rich inwardly. Now, these people are highly to be praised. They have little in the way of possessions, but are born again, and they're the beneficiaries of the riches of Christ, which are, by the way, credited to their spiritual accounts. Okay, third category, those who are rich outwardly and rich inwardly. There's not a lot, but there are some. There are some like Job was that way, Abraham, Joseph of Arimathea, Barnabas, but that's not God's will for everyone. Some people preach this health and wealth gospel. That's not in the Bible at all. The prosperity gospel, you know, if you give 10%, God's obligated to give back 100% back. It's called the principle of compensation. The Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible teaches God loves a cheerful giver, one that doesn't give grudgingly, but there isn't any percentage that's going to come back to you, not in this life. That is bogus. Okay, you can build your treasures in heaven if you sacrificially give with a good heart. Okay, so those who are rich outwardly and rich inwardly, and God has given some. I know one particular man, his name was Letourneau. And Letourneau eventually started a Bible college. He was the guy that built all these great big earth-moving machines with these gigantic wheels the size of a house, you know, during World War II. And he had made this pledge, Lord, if you allow my business to be successful, I'll give you 10%. Well, his business was real successful, but then he started to rationalize, well, if I use this 10% invested in my company, then Lord, I can give you more. Well, he went bankrupt. But so he learned his lesson, and eventually, by the end of his life, he was keeping 10% and giving 90% to the Lord's work. There's actually a college named after him called Letourneau. Fascinating book if you want to read something like that. And then the last group are those who are rich outwardly, but poor inwardly. And I know quite a few people like this. They have a lot of this world's goods. They got money in the bank. They got money in their IRAs. They got money in savings, you know. They got all these investments, but they're bankrupt, basically, spiritually. And this is the group that James is primarily warning about. And basically because they were selfish, you know, in their richness. And he advised them, by the way, to weep and howl. And he said, and he gave them 3 reasons for this. He says, let me tell you something. You rich people got a lot of money, but bankrupt, and your business owners that are taking advantage of a lot of people, and farm workers and ranchers and different companies and corporations that are exploiting the poor. He says, let me tell you something. I know how you acquired your wealth. God says he knows. He knows how they misused their wealth, and he also knows how they're going to misjudge their wealth. Okay, first thing, look in verse 4. Okay, chapter 5. How they acquired their wealth. The Bible does not, first of all, let me get this. The Bible does not discourage acquiring wealth. You know, in the law of Moses, specific rules are laid down for getting and securing wealth. The Jews in Canaan, they owned property, worked it, and benefit from the produce. In several of his parables, Jesus indicated his respect for personal property and private gain. What the Bible does condemn, though, concerning money and wealth and possession, is getting it by illegal means for illegal purposes. Okay? In other words, it wasn't done fairly or justly. Okay, so it was, by the way, it was the prophet Amos who thundered a message of judgment against the wealthy who robbed the poor and used the stolen wealth for selfish luxuries. And if you remember, these rich men were going out and exploiting the poor so that they could spend money on their fat wives. He called them the cows of Bashan, because all they would do is lay around and, you know, eat and drink and fool around and demand that their husbands go out and make more money so that they could spend it on their own lavish, selfish ways. And so they didn't get their money legally. They got it illegally. They were the ones that weighed at the scales wrongly. They're the ones that move the boundaries. They're the ones that throw in extra fees to get a little pocket money when it shouldn't have been there. Okay? So how did they acquire their wealth? One thing they did, look in verse 4, by holding back wages. Behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields and which has been withheld by you cries out against you, and the outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. And God knows if you hire somebody, you ought to pay that person every penny. Okay? Now, I always, whenever I hired anybody, I would always, for the most part, work alongside with them. And then at the end, I would always give them a bonus. Meanwhile, I would treat them greatly, bring them water and food. And I watched my mom do that growing up, and I've always done that. I've never let anybody take advantage of me. I've had some that tried. But in the end, I had a guy that moved my furniture from Colorado to Texas. And when he got to my house, he refused to unload unless I gave him another $500. And I had a contract guaranteed the payment. And he says, if you don't pay me, and it was, by the way, this was Christmas Eve. You don't pay me today, I'm taking all your furniture to storage. And we're going to leave it, then you have to pay a storage fee. And I'll never forget that day. I didn't have any choice. I had to pay him. You know, I remember standing there with my dad and unloading all that. I was mad as can be. Good thing I was a believer. I probably would have shot him. But after it was all done, I got all my furniture in the house. I let the guy know a thing or two. And I collected my $500 back and some from the company. He ended up getting fired. Okay, I had a person do that with me. I took my car into a dealership to get it inspected so that I could get my registration. He says, Manny, we can't pass your car because it has dirty brake fluid. I said, what? You know, he didn't know I have a little bit of a background in mechanics, and you know, they don't require that. He says, by the way, this is what we're going to need in order to fix your car. He gave me a bill for $2,500. Well, not that I not only not pay it, I took him to the Department of Motor Vehicles, got the guy fired. and got that result. So people are out there and they'll take advantage of you, especially women, because they just assume women know nothing about any kind of maintenance or mechanics, air conditioning, plumbing, and they will take advantage of you if you can. And God is warning them that if they do this, he knows. He's aware of it. Okay. There's some scriptural principles guiding the protection, by the way, of the laborer and the consumer. Deuteronomy 2:24-14. You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your countrymen or one of your aliens. So you don't take advantage of these illegals, who is in your land and in your tours. You shall give him the wages of his day before the sun sets, for he is poor and his heart is set on it, so that he may not cry against you to the Lord and it becomes sin to him. I used to do that kind of work. When I got out of the service, I went to California and I worked hoeing cotton and picking apricots, and at the end of the day, pay us at the end of each day. We lived in little migrant shacks, okay? And we were dependent on our money each day, and they would pay us at the end of the day. Leviticus 19:13, you shall not oppress your neighbor nor rob him. The wages of a hired man are not to remain with you all night until morning. In other words, you're to promptly pay the person that you hired. Okay. By the way, these rich men had hired laborers and promised to pay them a specific amount, and the men had completed the work, but they hadn't been paid. The tense of the verb kept back in the original Greek indicates that the laborers never did get their money. They kept it back permanently, and I don't know how people like this can sleep at night, knowing they hired somebody with the intent, I'm never going to pay you, okay? And one of the commandments is, thou shalt not steal. By the way, that's still a law of God, okay? That has never been changed or altered in the New Testament. Okay, another way they obtain illegal money, and this you see again all the time, especially more and more these days, not only by not paying their laborers and holding back their wages, but also by controlling the courts. James 5:6, you have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He does not resist you. The reason he doesn't resist you is because he can't afford expensive lawsuits, especially if you're here illegal, and somebody takes advantage of you. And, these wicked employers, they operate by what they call the golden rule. He who has the gold rules. But little do they realize that God is watching them. Proverbs 13:11, wealth obtained by fraud dwindles, but the one who gathers by labors increases. I saw a Hispanic guy uploaded a video of some Hispanic teenagers cutting grass, working their butts off to make a few dollars. And he says, this is the way it should be done in America. Hard work, these kids learning how to pay their own way without any dependency on the government. The government, God never intended the government to get involved in the welfare business, okay? That is left to families and churches. The government has got so far involved in it now that they even want to give illegals, just for being here, $450,000 each, if they by some way were separated from other family members for post-traumatic stress syndrome or some other garbage that they come up with. Really ridiculous. By the way, that money that the government spends and squanders is your money. It's our money. I won't give them money to do that. Come tax time, in no way in the world. I'm going to pay them so that they can use that money to support abortions in other countries and all that. And if everybody just did that, then the government wouldn't have any money to be doing this. Somebody would take over and things could get re-squared away right. Okay. Proverbs 23:4, do not worry yourself to gain wealth. Cease from your consideration of it. Okay, here's how they ended up misusing their wealth. It's bad enough to get money by holding back and by controlling the courts and hiring lawyers and getting involved in lawsuits and all kind of things, which, by the way, Christians are not to do among other Christians. Okay, and 1 Corinthians makes that really clear. Any Christian that sues another Christian, the Apostle Paul says that you are already defeated. Okay, that should not happen. How do they misuse their wealth? First of all, as I know, and some of you watching me that have done this too, they have stored it up. James 5:3, your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be a witness against you, and will consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up your treasures. And people have an abundance of money laid away for them, and they're not using for God's glory and for God's purposes. Now, there's nothing wrong with saving, but there's something really wrong with hoarding, okay? Even when they were hiring laborers and then not paying them. Hoarding is a really bad thing to do, If you got more than what you need to be sharing that with other people. Now, that's not about equal distribution or socialism. That's about doing benevolent thing and meeting people's needs. But really meeting needs, not just giving to somebody. And there's a difference. It takes some spiritual maturity to understand and use discernment in that regard. Okay. Philippians 4:17, not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek for the profit which increases to your account. Now, I've always used that principle in ministry that I've had for years. People ask Manny, how come you don't set up different accounts so that people can support you? I don't know, there's one that they got now that everybody, and I said, well, I never do that. What I do is if people lay it on their heart, then, I'll let them know a way how they can send support. But I don't set up any kind of thing and solicit or, if God puts it on their heart, that's up to them, and then when they do that, it says in Philippians 4:17, the same thing as Paul said, it says, not that I seek the gift itself, and that was his true integrity, as it is mine, but I seek for the profit which increases to your account. In other words, you're building treasures in heaven. Different ministers in church, they're just a recipient of it. But you don't really give to them, you're giving to the Lord. And it's real important that when people give generously or in good stewardship, that they have that clear understanding, okay? You don't give with the idea of getting something in return in this life, okay? That's not the idea. People and ministers that preach that, they say, you send me $100, I'm going to send you a handkerchief, I'm going to put oil on it and all this nonsense. All they're doing is playing you, they're hustling. Okay. Now, by the way, not 10 years after James wrote this book, what do you think happened to Jerusalem, all those rich people? Well, Jerusalem fell. Most all those rich people lost all their money. Remember, you study in history, when the stock market collapsed here in the beginning of the last century, and you saw what happened to a lot of people. So there's no guarantee, even what you have right now, stored away. They kept others from benefiting. James 5:4, behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields and which has been withheld by you, cries out against you, and the outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. My goodness. Those poor laborers needed the money to live on, and they're crying out to God, and God is hearing them. He's going to do something. 1 Corinthians 4:2, in this case, moreover, it is required of stewards that one be found trustworthy. If you do hire somebody, you need to be a good steward of it and take care of them. Proverbs 19:17, beautiful promise. He who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord. Isn't that great? He who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. Not in this life necessarily, but can you imagine lending money to God? God has everything. He doesn't need anything. He's self-sufficient. But the wording of this is awesome. He who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord. How about lending a little money to the Lord today? I think that is just great. Another way they squandered their money, they lived in luxury. James 5:5. You have lived luxury on the earth and led a life of want and pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. Wow. A magazine advertisement told of the shopping spree of one oil-rich Arab, a sultan. In one outing, he purchased 19 Cadillacs, one for each of his 19 wives. He paid extra to have the cars lengthened. He also bought 2 Porsches, 6 Mercedes, a $40,000 speedboat, and a truck for hauling it. Add to that list on that same day 16 refrigerators, $47,000 worth of women's luggage, 2 Florida grapefruit trees, 2 reclining chairs, and why I don't know, 1 slot machine. His total bill was $1,500,000, and then he had to pay another $200,000 to have everything delivered. That's living in luxury. And you know, that was written a number of years ago. People have spent a lot more money in one outing since then. In Luke 12:15, and he said to them, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. Somebody put on Facebook recently, the root of all evil is money. Well, that's not true. The root of all evil is the love of money, not money. Money is amoral. It's the love of it. That's that greed. 1 Timothy 6:17, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches. Take good note of that word uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen in this country this coming year. But on God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. So I got this friend of mine, he's real rich. He's trusting in his money. Okay, he's got it all stored away, all his bank accounts, everything all set. I'm trusting in God. Now, I'm not trying to use me as an example, but I'm just trying to make a comparison. I'm trusting in God. Who's more secure? Him with all his millions in the bank, or me with a couple of dollars in my pocket, but I trust in God? Who's more secure? Okay, only you can answer that question for yourself. Okay, I've already have done that a long time ago in myself. Okay, but I've learned a lot of things about money. You have a guy that makes $100 an hour, who lives in wanton pleasure and does all kind of runs around and all that. You got another guy that makes $10 an hour. Who's making more money? Well, God can cause that $10 an hour to go 100 times further than that $100 an hour that guy's making, if you trust in God. And I've seen that again over and by deals. God provides something here, another situation over here, all the time. It's so, who are you putting your trust in? That's real important. He says, instruct them to be good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, and that's eternity, so that they may take hold of that which is life indeed. Okay, how they misjudge their will. Well, this is what ends up happening. Looking, their riches are going to disappear. James 5:2, your riches have rotted and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted. And then it says again, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches. Another thing that happens in how they misjudge their wealth is that their riches ends up corrupting their character. And we see that with a lot of politicians now in this country, a lot of movie stars, people in the entertainment business, even those that have gotten in mega churches, and Christians that have used the church as a marketplace, and their character totally corrupt. Says James 5:3, your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be a witness against you and will consume your flesh like fire. You know, there are very few people that get a lot of money and have a lot of possession that retain their character. Abraham was one. He retained his character, but not his nephew Lot. Lot went all the way to Sodom and Gomorrah. Even lost his wife, a lot of his family, as God burned up Sodom and Gomorrah. Their riches will also bring present judgment on them. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be a witness against you and will consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up treasures. For all that they have done, James has this warning now. Come now, you rich, weep and howl, for your miseries are coming upon you. This is what's going to happen. You have condemned and put to death the righteous man, and he does not resist you. Okay, so James warns the rich man how he got his money, how he misused his money, how he mistrusted his money. And we got to ask this question here. If you have $1 million house, but there is no home, what good is it? If you have a diamond ring, but there's no love, what good is it? What good is all the riches in this world, but you have none in the next? No matter what our outward possessions we may have, God wants us to be rich inside. He wants us to have treasures in heaven. For where your treasures are, that's where your heart will be. And God wants us to treasure first and foremost the Lord God himself and his word and his people and his love for justice, especially for those that are poor. God bless you all. I hope this was worked out for you. We'll see you tomorrow.